The line crackled, the sound barely keeping up with the panic on the other end. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher asked, her voice steady, trained for chaos. There was a pause, not long but long enough to feel it. When Colin Turner finally spoke, his voice was tight, forced through clenched teeth. My wife locked me in the garage, he said. She tried to break my arm. The words came out rushed, like he was trying to say everything before something worse happened. The dispatcher tried to calm him, asking for details, his location, anything to help. But before he could answer fully, a sudden sharp crack tore through the line. A gunshot. Colin's voice spiked with terror. She just shot me. Another blast. Then another. The dispatcher shouted his name. No reply. The line stayed open, the static growing louder by the second, filling the silence he left behind. Somewhere, just out of reach, life had been stolen in the time it took to make a desperate call. For a few moments after the shots, the world on the other end of the line held its breath. No cries. No footsteps. No more voices. The dispatcher's voice cut through the silence, firm but urgent. Sir? Can you hear me? Sir? Nothing answered but a low hum, the faint background buzz of a call left hanging open. Every second that passed without a response tightened the knot in the dispatcher's chest. Protocol said stay on the line, but even without seeing it, she knew. Something irreversible had already taken place. Officers raced toward the address, sirens carving a path through the Gulf Breeze streets. Inside that suburban home, the neat lawns and quiet neighbors stood unaware of the violence that had just ended a life. A decorated military family, shattered in an instant. But what could have driven someone to pull the trigger not once but 4 times? At the heart of the chaos were 2 people, Bree Kristen Kuhn and Colin James Turner. To their friends and neighbors, they were the kind of couple you admired, 2 military professionals building a life together, raising their children, and navigating the challenges that come with service and sacrifice. But inside the walls of their home, a different reality had been unfolding, one that neither rank nor reputation could shield them from. What began as heated arguments had turned into calls for help. Each missed warning, each visit that ended without intervention, moved them closer to a point of no return. How could a family built on discipline, duty, and devotion collapse so violently? What pressures pushed them beyond breaking? Today we step inside a story where love, loyalty, and tragedy collided, and no one walked away unchanged. If you've ever wondered how quickly love can turn into tragedy, stay with us, because the answers aren't as simple as they seem. And if you believe in shedding light on stories that matter, stories that leave behind lessons, not just headlines, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and join the conversation. Bree Kristen Kuhn built her life around structure and service. As a chief petty officer stationed at Naval Air Station Pensacola, discipline wasn't just part of her job, it was how she defined herself. Years in the Navy had shaped her into someone who knew how to lead under pressure. Commanding respect came naturally. She had climbed the ranks through perseverance, sacrifice, and a clear sense of mission. Colleagues described her as reliable, calm in the face of stress, the kind of person you wanted in charge when everything else was falling apart. At home, Bree tried to bring that same order into her family life. 3 children filled the house with noise, needs, and constant demands, and Bree, ever the organizer, carried the invisible weight of trying to keep everything running smoothly. Balancing deployments, duty rosters, and motherhood wasn't easy. Still, to those who knew her only from a distance, Bree seemed to handle it all with the same crisp efficiency she brought to her military career. But in private moments, where medals meant little and schedules unraveled faster than any mission briefing, the cracks in her armor were harder to hide. Colin James Turner once wore the proud uniform of the United States Marine Corps. Discipline, loyalty, and grit, these weren't just values to him, they were the foundation of who he was. But after years of service, Colin returned home with scars no one could see. A traumatic brain injury sustained during his time in the Marines altered the course of his future. The man who had once thrived under pressure now faced a daily battle within his own mind. Memory lapses, sudden mood swings, and frustration that simmered just beneath the surface. Determined not to be defined by his injuries, Colin enrolled in college, studying electrical engineering with the kind of dedication that had once earned him promotions in the field. Acceptance into a master's program at Johns Hopkins University seemed like a turning point, a chance to rebuild, to move forward. At home, he was a father trying to be present, a husband trying to hold on, even when the pressure of it all became overwhelming. He loved his children deeply, but the invisible wounds he carried often complicated even the simplest moments. From the sidewalk, their family looked like any other, 3 kids, a hard-working mother, a father building a second chance. But sometimes appearances are only a reflection of the life people hope to have, not the life they're actually living. From the outside, the Kuhn-Turner household was the image of resilience. Inside, it was a different story, one shaped by small, daily battles no one else could see. Traumatic brain injuries often come with consequences that ripple through every corner of a person's life. For Colin, it meant wrestling with unpredictable emotions, flashes of anger, and moments where patience wore dangerously thin. Some days were good. Others unraveled without warning. Bree, trained to manage chaos in her professional life, found herself struggling to manage it at home. The structured routines that worked on a naval base didn't always translate to the unpredictable rhythms of a family affected by trauma. Arguments flared over parenting decisions, financial pressures, even minor miscommunications that once might have been brushed aside. There were attempts to seek help, counseling sessions, coping strategies, but between Colin's injury and Bree's relentless drive to keep moving forward, real change always felt just out of reach. Neighbors occasionally heard raised voices but chalked it up to normal stress. Friends saw less and less of them, busy as they were with careers and raising 3 young children. No one realized how much weight was building behind those closed doors. Or how close that weight was to snapping the life they had worked so hard to build. The more Bree tried to maintain control, the more unstable the foundation beneath her seemed to grow. Small arguments turned into drawn-out confrontations. Misunderstandings that once would have been shrugged off now lingered, feeding resentment on both sides. Stress tightened its grip around the family with each passing month. Stress from careers, from finances, from the silent struggle of managing a home where tension never really went away. Colin's frustrations sometimes boiled over without warning, ignited by things that, to others, might have seemed trivial. Bree, carrying the expectations of her career and motherhood, responded with her own brand of unrelenting firmness. Neither wanted to give up on the family they had built, but neither seemed able to find the version of themselves that existed before everything became so heavy. Their home, once a safe space, began to feel more like a battleground. Words became weapons. Distance grew even in the smallest rooms. The kids, too young to understand the full weight of what they were witnessing, learned to tiptoe carefully around their parents, sensing when the air grew too tense to ignore. It wasn't one moment that shattered everything. It was a slow accumulation of missed chances, buried emotions, and silent alarms, until one day the silence was broken by something far louder. Have you or someone you know struggled with hidden struggles behind closed doors? Tell us in the comments. Your story matters. The morning of September 8, 2021, began like a slow-burning fuse. At 12:53 p.m., Bree Kuhn picked up the phone and dialed 911. Her voice was steady, almost detached, as she reported a domestic dispute, an argument about their children that had gotten out of hand. Deputies arrived a few minutes later. They found no broken furniture, no bruises, no obvious signs that the situation was spinning out of control. Just 2 adults standing in a tidy home, saying what countless others had said before them. It's fine. Everything's under control. The officers left. The door closed behind them. But inside that house the tension didn't go away, it thickened. By 5 p.m. another call came through. This time it was Colin Turner's voice, clipped, urgent. Another argument, another plea for help. The same deputies returned. They asked questions, walked the familiar halls, listened to 2 stories that didn't quite match. Once again, no arrest. No forced separation. Just a warning to keep things calm. Advice that rarely fixes anything when emotions are already running high. They drove away, leaving the family to patch things up on their own. Only they didn't. With each hour that passed, something tightened inside that house. Old frustrations mixed with fresh rage. And when the third call came in just after 6:20 p.m., it wasn't about an argument anymore. It was about survival. And someone wasn't going to make it out alive. At 6:22 p.m., the final call for help came in. Colin Turner's voice was tight, strained, the words tumbling out faster than the dispatcher could keep up. She locked me in the garage, he said, breathless. She tried to break my arm. In the background, muffled sounds bled through, doors slamming, footsteps pounding, a voice shouting something too distorted to understand. The dispatcher urged him to stay calm, to stay on the line, to wait for help. But help was already too far away. Inside that garage, Colin wasn't just trapped behind a door, he was trapped inside a situation spiraling out of anyone's control. And Bree was armed. The sounds came fast, sudden, brutal. A single crack, sharp, unmistakable, broke through the call. Colin's voice spiked into panic. She just shot me. Another shot. Another. The dispatcher shouted his name over the line. No answer. Only the dead, humming emptiness of a connection that no longer had a living voice on the other end. Deputies raced back to the address they had visited twice already that day. But this time, when they crossed the threshold, it wasn't to mediate an argument. It was to find Colin's body lying still, 4 gunshot wounds in his back. The garage, a space meant for storage and tools, had become a final battleground. And somewhere inside that home, Bree waited for them. When deputies entered the Gulf Breeze home for the third and final time that day, the air inside was heavier than anything they had encountered before. In the garage, Colin Turner lay motionless. 4 bullets had torn through his back, a deliberate pattern that left no doubt the shots were meant to end, not to warn. His phone was still connected to the 911 dispatcher, the line open but silent. An eerie reminder of a conversation that had started with hope and ended in horror. Inside the main house, Bree stood waiting. There was no struggle when officers approached her. No attempt to run, no frantic explanations. Just a woman, quiet and composed, in the home she and Colin had once built together. Their 3 children were still inside, witnesses to a tragedy they would carry long after the uniforms left and the news crews packed up. Neighbors began gathering outside, drawn by the flashing lights and the sudden swarm of activity. Some whispered. Some simply stared. None of them knew that one of the most devastating moments in their quiet community's history had just unfolded behind that front door. By nightfall, the once quiet home had become a full crime scene. Bree Kuhn was taken into custody without resistance. Charged with first-degree premeditated murder, she was booked into the Santa Rosa County Jail, her military uniform replaced by a jumpsuit that stripped away every symbol of her former authority. The children, shell-shocked and confused, were separated. 2 placed into protective custody with the Florida Department of Children and Families, while the 3rd was sent to live with their biological father. Detectives combed through the house, searching for answers that still didn't make sense. Why had a decorated Navy chief, someone who spent her career protecting others, turned a gun on her own husband? Why had 2 calls for help earlier that day ended with no action? And most haunting of all, could any of it have been stopped? The answers wouldn't come easily. For Gulf Breeze, the story wasn't just about a shooting. It was about what's lost when help arrives too late, and when the cries behind closed doors are answered with silence instead of rescue. When Bree Kuhn stood before the court, she was no longer the confident officer her peers remembered. She was a woman on trial for the murder of her husband, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Her defense team built their case around one central claim: survival. They argued that Bree had lived under constant fear, trapped in a marriage strained by Colin's traumatic brain injury. His moods, they said, were unpredictable. Outbursts, threats, and flashes of violence had become a part of daily life behind closed doors. They intended to present a battered spouse defense, a legal strategy designed to show that Bree's actions were not the product of malice but of desperation. That to her, pulling the trigger wasn't a choice, it was the only way to end the threat she faced. The defense painted a picture of a woman pushed beyond her limits. Years of pressure, fear, and emotional exhaustion had finally collapsed into a single, irreversible act. But when the time came for Bree to testify, to tell her story, to put her fear into her own words, she chose silence. She declined to take the stand. Without her voice, the battered spouse defense lost its strongest weapon. And in a courtroom where every detail mattered, her silence echoed louder than any testimony could have. The prosecution wasted no time dismantling the defense's version of events. Their case was built on stark, unflinching facts. Colin Turner was unarmed. He had been locked in a garage, cut off from escape. And when the shots were fired, they struck him not from the front, but in the back. For prosecutors, it was a simple equation. If Bree Kuhn had truly feared for her life, why would she fire into a man who was trying to get away? They pointed to the calmness in Bree's voice after the shooting, the lack of visible injuries, the absence of any clear evidence that Colin posed an immediate threat when he was gunned down. Photographs, 911 call recordings, and expert testimony formed the backbone of the case. Every detail, every piece of evidence, steered the jury toward one conclusion. This wasn't self-defense. This was execution. After 4 days of testimony, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. The sentence was swift and unforgiving. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. No medals, no years of service, no hidden struggles could change the weight of the evidence. In the eyes of the court, Bree Kuhn had crossed a line that could never be walked back. And for the children left behind, the verdict didn't bring closure. It only confirmed what they already knew, their family was gone. The story of Bree Kuhn and Colin Turner isn't just about what happened inside a single house on a single day. It's about the warning signs that so often go unseen, or worse, ignored. 2 911 calls had been made earlier that day. 2 separate chances for intervention. Each time, officers left without taking action, believing the situation wasn't urgent enough to escalate. From the outside, there were no bruises, no shattered furniture, no dramatic signs of danger. But behind the thin walls of civility, real fear had been building for a long time. Fear that didn't leave marks you could photograph. Fear that didn't always raise its voice. Domestic conflicts don't always announce themselves in ways the system is trained to recognize. Sometimes, the deepest fractures are hidden under polite smiles and quiet assurances that everything's fine. And when help only comes after the violence explodes, it's already too late. The tragedy in Gulf Breeze reminds us that real danger doesn't always come with flashing lights. Sometimes it comes quietly, step by step, until there's no chance left to turn back. Mental wounds don't heal with time alone. They linger, reshaping lives in ways even those closest can struggle to understand. Colin Turner's traumatic brain injury wasn't something anyone could see. There were no bandages, no crutches, just invisible battles that followed him into every room he entered. Memory lapses, emotional swings, frustration that seemed to ignite out of nowhere. Bree carried her own silent burdens. The pressure to manage a household, a military career, and a marriage that no longer felt predictable. The unspoken fear of what each day might bring. When 2 people are fighting invisible wars, sometimes love isn't enough to hold the line. Not without support. Not without real intervention. The tragedy wasn't inevitable. But without honest conversations about mental health, without real systems to catch families teetering on the edge, the fall becomes all but certain. Gulf Breeze didn't just lose a husband and a wife that day. It lost a family. And the ripples of that loss stretch far beyond one address, one courtroom, or one set of headlines. A decorated officer. A wounded Marine. 3 children caught between 2 lives unraveling faster than anyone realized. The story of Bree Kuhn and Colin Turner leaves behind a wound that statistics can't measure. It's easy to read about a case like this and wonder how it got so far, why no one stepped in, how 2 people who once promised to build a future together ended up standing on opposite sides of a fatal choice. But real life isn't built on clear villains and heroes. It's built on moments, small decisions, overlooked warnings, silent struggles, that layer over time until the weight becomes unbearable. Today, somewhere in Gulf Breeze, there's an empty house once filled with laughter and arguments and dreams now left unspoken. And 3 young lives trying to navigate a future shaped by a past they didn't choose. If this story moved you, if it made you think twice about the hidden battles people around you might be fighting, take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to this channel. Because the more we talk about the hard truths, the better chance we have to prevent stories like this from repeating themselves.